Over the next couple of days, there's going to be several disturbances moving across the Dakotas and Minnesota, and that's going to be bringing a few rounds of snow to the region. One round in particular could bring several inches of snow and bring a disruption of travel across parts of our area. So let's go on and take a look. Now at the upper levels, we still have this split flow pattern where we have this bigger jet, the subtropical jet further to the south, and our polar jet here running across our region. And off to the west is the main disturbance that's going to be moving across the Rockies and deepening as we go through the time frame. Now, the main thing to kind of focus on here is that the fact that we still do have that strong jet further to the south that's going to be holding a good part of the moisture further down to the south. Now, with that said, we still are going to have a good little piece of energy that's going to be blasting through our area. Here you can see a pretty strong jet that's going to be nosing into our region and bringing that chance of snow, particularly across parts of North Dakota and northern Minnesota. But again, we have this bit of a split flow pattern, so it's going to limit just a little bit some of the snow potential that could fall across our region, certainly with this type of storm as it moves through our area. And I'll show you the surface pattern in a little bit. But one that looks like this normally would bring us a lot more snow across a lot wider, more of a broad area of our region. But because we have that stronger jet further to the south holding more of that energy down there, it's actually going to help limit the amount of snow that we're going to get overall. Here you can see already going Sunday night into Monday morning, we have our first piece of energy that's rolling across our region, going to be bringing some chance of snow across the far north. Not a whole lot, but that's just the first little bit. Now, as this strong trough deepens out here and begins to move east, we can see that storm system begin just to develop a little more and get a little deeper now as it begins to eject out. And here's that main batch of snow. And we'll zoom in on this just a little bit going into Monday night and Tuesday morning. That's that main part, that area that we're most concerned about as this storm system kicks through. Now, as that little low pressure system kicks on off, we have kind of a secondary one that wants to build and pull off to the northeast and bring some snow along with it. And here's kind of the point, especially where perhaps if we had a little bit different setup, that some of you areas across eastern and particularly southeastern parts of Minnesota would really get nailed. But as it looks right now, because we do have that split flow pattern with one jet here and the other one kind of sweeping in right this, limiting that moisture, that should help reduce the amount of snow for you down across southeastern parts of Minnesota. So through the overnight hours going into Monday morning, expect a rain-snow mix moving across the region through the overnight. This is about to 3 a.m. Monday morning and 6 a.m. You could see perhaps some of this gets a little heavier across northwestern parts of Minnesota. Not all the models really agreeing particularly on that, but this particular model, the GFS model's really been persistent on this, and the other models have sort of shifted into this thinking just slightly. So as we wake up in the morning, particularly again across northwestern parts of Minnesota, some of you could already be seeing some light to moderate snow even, and perhaps even some accumulating snow as we go through the Monday morning hours. This is 9 a.m. and by noontime, already that first little wave is through our region. Now this area outlined in blue are just some areas that could possibly see some snow through Monday morning. Most areas really won't see any accumulation. The ground is obviously just too warm, and whatever kind of snow you do get really isn't expected to stick. So I think most of you really are looking at maybe a ½ inch or less, and most of that's going to be on grassy areas. The one exception, as I said before, could be up here in the far northwestern parts of Minnesota, where perhaps you could pick up an inch or two by the time this is said and done. This is moving through quite quickly, but as I said, that ground temperature is still warm, so it's going to be having a little harder time to stick. Now, there is also the possibility through the overnight hours of some areas seeing some spotty freezing rain along with that, particularly, again, across the far north central and northeastern parts of North Dakota. So north of Highway 2 has kind of got that chance, perhaps, of seeing some freezing rain in some spotty areas through the overnight hours Sunday night and going into Monday morning as well. So other than that snow moving across the north Monday morning, most of the region really won't see much activity at all until we get into Monday night. And actually, once we get to about midnight, Monday night, Tuesday morning, that's really when it looks like at this point the activity really begins to increase, especially from probably northwestern parts of South Dakota up through south central and even eastern parts of North Dakota. This area really begins to pick up quickly through the overnight hours. Now, once we get to about 3 a.m., here's where things really begin to ramp up even more and get a little more interesting, especially as we get into eastern parts of North Dakota and northern portions of Minnesota. So really, we're going to broaden this out because the models aren't agreeing 100% where some of this heavier activity is. So we're gonna broaden this area out in that yellow. That's where the possibility of seeing some moderate snow through the overnight hours Monday night going into early Tuesday morning. That's going to be causing a problem across this part of our region, dropping several inches of snow, bringing some gusty winds along with it, and probably making travel fairly hazardous as we get into Tuesday morning. Now, this is 6 a.m. here. You can see where that moderate activity moves across north central and perhaps even northeastern parts of Minnesota. We're kind of following the American model right now, as I kind of pointed out before. This one has been pretty consistent overall with how it's been handling this storm, and other models are kind of starting to fall in line with the American model as time gets closer. So that's kind of why I've been following this one a little more as we get closer to this event. But nevertheless, we'll kind of keep it a little vague just because there is still some uncertainty to this. Now, by 9 a.m., you can see now the back edge begins to move into the Red River Valley. That heavier stuff basically reserved up in the north central and perhaps northeastern parts of Minnesota. And then really, once we get to about noon on Tuesday, most of that heavier areas are moving off to the north and east, and we'll have some light snow left across the north. And then here comes that second batch that's going to be moving across the far southeast as we get into Tuesday afternoon. Now here's kind of the timing of the snow going into Monday night and Tuesday morning with this area that's going to cause the most concern. You can see here in kind of the lighter green here is where the snow is going to move in by the midnight time frame, just kind of poking into that Grand Forks region. And then sometime between midnight to about 6 a.m., completing its trek across northwestern parts of Minnesota and now beginning to creep into southeastern parts of North Dakota and just a little bit slipping just a little bit further south into South Dakota. And beyond that, between 6 a.m. to about noon time frame is where the main band kind of begins to move through Ely, perhaps Aberdeen, and down into Pierre and Rapid City as well. Again, between 6 a.m. and noon time frame is when you can be expecting that snow to be reaching your area. Now, I'm going to show you a forecasted snow accumulation map here. Keep this in mind that, as I said, the models still aren't agreeing 100% on exactly how much and exactly where some of this. But for now, this is kind of where I think we need to be focused on. And some of this could obviously change yet as we get closer to Monday night. So make sure you stay updated on my social media sites, as I'll post any updates on there across Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, X as well. But take a look at these accumulation totals that I've got here. Mostly we're looking at that north central area of Minnesota that could pick up the most amount of snow, where we're looking at 6+ inches across the north there. Otherwise, we get kind of in that 3 to 6 mark up in through eastern parts of North Dakota, stretching back down to the southwest into south central parts of North Dakota as well. And then again, across a good part of northern Minnesota. And then we're looking at around 1 to 3 inches roughly back into southwestern parts of North Dakota, northwest South Dakota, and kind of stretching across northern areas of South Dakota. And again, basically stretching mostly across the remainder of northern Minnesota. Now here we've got this secondary area where I'm going to show you here in a little bit as far as the timing goes. But perhaps some of you areas down in the far, far southeast could pick up a 1 to maybe 4 inch mark at the most, the way it's looking right now. Doesn't look like it's going to be a big snow accumulator at this point, but right now we're keeping it a little broad just in case we get one little burst of snow perhaps that could accumulate a little more in some of these areas. At any rate, here's kind of that area that we're going to be watching for through the remainder of Tuesday that could pick up some additional accumulating snow. And there is the snow already beginning on Tuesday right around noon time frame, and that's going to be moving kind of east, a little bit north of east as we get to 3 p.m. on Tuesday, and 6 p.m. it begins to move into the Twin Cities and Rochester area. And then actually kind of lingers just a little bit as we get to 9 p.m. and midnight, and then it begins to move on out of the region. So it doesn't stick around long, and it doesn't look overly intense. So that's why at this point, we're not really overly concerned with the amount of snow down in that area. Now, one other thing to mention is going to be the wind gusts associated with it. Now, mind you, this is around midnight, Monday night, Tuesday morning. And right through here is about where that snow line's going to be at this point. So you can see some of you areas are going to be dealing with 30, 35 mile per hour gusts already as that snow was falling across that region. Once we get to about 6 a.m. or snow, the winds push further east. We got 30, 35, perhaps even pushing maybe 40 miles per hour in some areas across the valley. And then by that point, you can looking at that snow moving across much of this region. So any type of snow that will be falling, obviously, especially across the Red River Valley, you're going to be dealing with some blowing, some drifting snow, and the reduced visibilities along with it. So now while some of you areas might not be picking up the most amount of snow, you're still dealing with some pretty good winds, and that's going to be blowing and drifting and reducing visibilities and just causing hazardous travel conditions as we get into Tuesday morning. Now those wind gusts do push a little bit east as we get to 9 a.m. and noon, but most of it, the stronger winds remain just a little bit further south. Whereas, as you remember, most of the heavier snow by this point moves across northern parts of Minnesota. So perhaps as you get into more of the wooded areas across northern Minnesota, might not blow around as much, but you've got the best chance for seeing the most amount of snow along with it. So a bit of a catch-22. You might not get the wind, but you've got the best chance for seeing some pretty good snowfall accumulation through that region. Ultimately, I think the area that I'm kind of concerned about is going to be across the Red River Valley and across eastern parts of North Dakota between the wind and the snowfall. Now, those winds do diminish as we go through the overnight hours Tuesday night and into Wednesday, so things should begin to improve pretty quickly as we get into Wednesday. And in fact, when we take a look at the high temperatures now, granted, we're still looking kind of chilly across northern parts of Minnesota through Wednesday. These areas across the southwest begin to rebound pretty quickly as we're looking in the 40s already by Wednesday for high temperatures. And then wouldn't you know it, by Thursday already, most of these models are predicting 50s and 60s across a good part of our region, probably going to remain a little cool across the northeast with some of that snowfall. So temperatures might struggle in some areas to get above freezing as we get into Thursday. But look at that rebound. That's going to be very, very quick with these temperatures to come on back on up through our region. And in fact, if we want to have a little more fun, look at Friday gets even better as we're looking at 60s to 70s. And that's many of the models are actually showing that, as you can see, especially across southern parts of Minnesota and going into South Dakota. So it's just going to warm back up by the time we get into the later part of next week. Now, what's bringing us this warm air as we get into the later part of next week and going on into next weekend is this big ridge that begins to develop and allows this warm air again to bubble back into our region. But what's causing this ridge to develop is this storm system that's going to be slamming on to the west coast by this weekend and moving eastward eventually. And we've got kind of the potential for seeing another storm moving into our region perhaps a week from now. Now that's a long way out there, but the funny thing is at this point is that all the models actually agree that something should be moving through our region by next week at this time. So we'll keep an eye on that. Obviously, way too far out to say for sure, but man, it's looking a little interesting, perhaps, as we could see the potential of another storm moving into our region. A lot of people have been saying it all winter up here. We've been awfully lucky. When are we going to pay for it? Well, perhaps Mother Nature is going to be collecting on some debt over the next week. We'll see. We'll keep an eye on it, and we'll let you know as things develop. But in the meantime, make sure you do keep an eye on if I could get my pointer finger pointed in the right spot, on my social media sites across Instagram, X, and Facebook. That's where I'm going to be putting up the graphics that you saw a little bit earlier in this video, and I'll put up any type of updated graphics there as well. I'll try to get out a video hopefully tomorrow night. I'm going to be a little busy again. If it does come out, it'll be late into the night once more, but be on the lookout for that. For sure, be on the lookout for a video later in the week, as we're going to be looking at the potential for this next system coming through the area and just seeing how that develops, and if that's going to be moving through our area. All right, folks, man, I've just been stumbling through this video, so we'll just end it by saying, if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and hit the little bell button that pops up alongside it. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit the like button as well. So for Region Weather Live, I'm meteorologist Brad Werner, and everybody have a good day.